So, Aliens is the sequel to Ridley Scott's movie Alien, directed by James Cameron. And while I love to say that Alien is my favorite movie in the franchise, Aliens is the one I quote the most because James Cameron wrote one hell of a script for this movie, and it's amazing. He knocks it out of the park when it comes to making sequels, as he's shown us before in Terminator 2, and in fact, even in Avatar The Way of Water, which is a lot better than the first Avatar movie he gave us, which essentially is just Pocahontas but with the painted blue over it. But this movie picks up with Ellen Ripley being found by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation after the events of the first movie, and solidifying the fact that the Weyland-Yutani Corp are the real villains here. They decide to find her for destruction of the Nostromo, and they don't believe a word about this alien at all. In fact, one of the interesting twists I found with the script as to why they don't believe her is the fact that there's a colony on LV 426 called Hadley's Hope. In the time that it's taken between the first movie and the events of the second movie, of course, that doesn't really go very well, does it? And they send in a group of colonial marines. When things seem to be a little too quiet over at the colony, we also get introduced to a child character called Newt, who Ripley becomes a sort of surrogate mother to. And if you watch the director's cut of the movie, you'll see there's a scene very early on where Ellen Ripley finds out that her actual daughter on Earth has actually died in the amount of time she's been in cryosleep for, which I think is a very important scene because it shows you that Ripley missed out on being a mother to her own child because of what she had to go through. And Newt is her second chance to essentially go through that. So we get a very quickly established sort of somewhat redemption arc for Ripley to care for a child, essentially. In fact, the whole theme of the movie is motherhood because the antagonist, if you can call it that, is the alien queen, which lays the xenomorph eggs, which create facehuggers, of course, which then create more xenomorphs. And it's that theme of a mother protecting its young that essentially is the climax of this movie. Now, while Aliens is an amazing movie, I hesitate to call it a good alien movie because it's not a horror movie. It's more an action movie than anything else, and a very good action movie at that. But to me personally, I think the Alien franchise should be a horror franchise. I think Aliens is like the odd one out in the series because the xenomorphs just aren't very scary in this. They're a great antagonistic force, don't get me wrong. And there are some really tense moments in this as well. But nothing ever quite matches up to the body horror we got in the first movie with the chest burster, and even that deleted scene with a crew member being turned into an egg. And seeing xenomorphs getting mowed down by machine gun fire, or pulse rifle fire, sorry, sort of lessens the impact they would have had. Now, people famously hypothesized that Ridley Scott hated the fact that James Cameron came up with the Queen alien because it was such a good idea and he never thought of it. And they often point to that being the reason why the prequel movies seem to go out of its way to explain the origins of the xenomorph to a convoluted degree. And while there's no real confirmation of that, James Cameron creating the Queen xenomorph is legitimately one of the best things that's ever happened to this franchise. The point where I don't think it's ever been topped. And I'm pretty sure he also gave us the word xenomorph because they don't actually mention it in the first movie. Like I mentioned in my previous review, the actual alien was called Big Chap. But again, like Alien before it, this movie has aged incredibly well. I think it is down to the fact that a lot of the effects were done practically, and it holds up a lot better than CGI would have done over the years, which is something I can't say about the next film I'm going to be reviewing. Aliens also has a fantastic cast, and one of the things that James Cameron did whilst shooting the movie is he allowed the cast who played the Marines to customize their uniforms and equipment whatever way they want, just to make them all feel more lived in and unique. Now, there is some controversy regarding one aspect of this movie, and that's the character of Vasquez, who's actually a white actress doing blackface. And I know people have brought up her mixed heritage and stuff, but when you realize she's also the mom in Terminator 2, it's really fucking hard to try and justify what happened in Aliens. Well, they essentially just painted her brown and made her put on an accent when they could have just hired a Hispanic actor for that role. But I guess this movie did come out at a time where things like that was still happening. And if we're going to point fingers, the BBC was still putting out very offensive, racially charged content like Little Britain since the early 2000s. But it's just a shame to have a racist practice like that taint what is quite a good movie, and in fact, one of the better characters as well. As for which version of the movie to watch, I personally choose to watch the director's cut. Like I mentioned earlier, the context of Ripley and her daughter really does reframe how you see her relationship with Newt. I personally don't think that scene should have been cut from the theatrical cut because it's not a very long scene at all, and it does add so much more context in such a short amount of time. So whenever I rewatch the movie or I introduce someone to the movie, I personally choose to watch the director's cut every single time. Personally, when I rank this movie, I would say it's definitely one of the best in the entire franchise. In fact, it's one I would recommend people watch even if they don't like horror movies, because this technically isn't one. And regardless of how you feel about James Cameron's recent movies, there really is no denying the man knows how to write a really good script and direct a really fucking good sequel. And I think this came out around the time when he was at his prime. And you can tell it was a very culturally impactful movie, considering how many times this specific entry in the Alien franchise has been referenced over and over by other media, mostly because of its iconic lines. But those are just my thoughts on the movie Aliens. Let me know in the comments below how you think it ranks amongst the franchise, if you think it's the best, which I know a lot of people really do. Or if you're like me and you think the original will always be the best. Or if you have a different movie in the franchise that is your favorite. I am reviewing all the movies in the series on this channel, so if you want to watch my next review of Alien 3, please do drop a subscribe and a like to help me out. I'm still working my way up to 1,000 subscribers. Check out some of my other videos, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. I also live stream on this channel if you want to chat with me directly when I'm live. But until then, sayonara.